Hello and welcome to European UFOs. My name is Sebastian, and if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your chosen platform. Sharing and liking really help the algorithm and are greatly appreciated. If you'd like to support the show and keep it ad-free, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com. The link is in the description. In this episode, we're entering the world of crop circles, but not in the way you might expect. We often associate these formations with extraterrestrial visitors, mysterious lights in the sky, or elaborate hoaxes. But what if reality is even stranger? My guest today is Dee, an ex-crop circle maker who wishes to remain anonymous due to the legal implications of making crop circles on private land. His perspective is both provocative and refreshing. Dee insists that whilst humans make the majority of these formations, the process of creating them often triggers inexplicable paranormal events. In fact, he argues that the human element is not a flaw in the mystery, it's the key to understanding it. Dee shares his journey from skeptical researcher to hands-on participant in the crop circle phenomenon. Along the way, he encountered flashes of light, floating orbs, strange synchronicities, and encounters that felt inexplicably intense, even menacing. He takes us inside the world of nighttime circle making, explains the techniques used, and explores why so many of these formations appear in the mystical landscape of Wiltshire, a county in the southwest of England. Are crop circles a form of contact initiated through human consciousness? Could our ancestors' sacred stone circles and today's crop formations be part of the same ancient dialogue? And what happens when the phenomenon reveals a more unsettling side? Join us as we delve into the curious intersection of human creativity and unexplained phenomena at the heart of the crop circle mystery. Good morning, Dee. Lovely to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to be here, my friend.
Lovely. So today we are going to talk about crop circles, about which you have a very personal tale to tell, and also one that bears great relevance to the fields of paranormal and UAP research. So before we delve into that, could you tell us how you got interested in crop circle making and how you actually went about doing it in the end?
I've got a deep-seated interest in the paranormal and especially ufology, and I've had it since I was a child. And when I saw Close Encounters at the age of about 11 at the cinema, it had a profound effect on me in that as a kid, I kind of even thought it was a documentary. It was kind of latently tapping into this part of my psyche, part of the collective consciousness, where I thought, well, I'm remembering this rather than seeing it for the first time. It's a very profound effect. So I became deeply entrenched in ufology, and in those days I was mainly reading John Keel, Jacques Vallée, who I think is the godfather of ufology personally, Jenny Randall's, John Spencer, a lot of the 70s and 80s and 60s writers. But every year I used to religiously get the UFO casebook, and it would be photographs and reports of sightings that year. Then we started to see in the UFO casebooks, they started to print pictures of crop circles. And in those days, Sebastian, they were very basic. They were like cookie cutter events. They were single circles that looked like birthed UFOs had pressed into the corn. So they were either single circles or they had 4 satellite circles maybe around the edges that made them look like the old B movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still craft with the tripods. And their presidents were the Australian 70s tulliness, which were done in grass. But because these crop circles are done in crop, they were far more pronounced because the crop was like 1 or 2 feet high. So I became very interested, thinking, what's that? And they were presented as birthed flying saucers that had landed and flown off again. And then in 1990, we had the first pictogram, which you'll probably know from the Led Zeppelin cover. And that was a different affair entirely. That was two circles connected by a bar with like forks coming off of it, very, very sort of frilly. And at that point, because that doesn't look like a UFO, the polemic between the birthed UFOs and, and these patterns should have been obliterated straight away. So that no UFO looks like that. But what had happened was the idea of UFOs and crop circles became so ingrained in the public psyche that people said, oh, well, that's not a landed UFO. That's a message from our space brothers, which I always thought was very clunky, that transition. So anyway, I became very interested. For 10 years, I travelled to Wiltshire from my home in London, and I used the crop circle connector to plot where the circles would be. And if there was 15, I'd do all 15 in a day. I just plan my route. And I did that for many years. And but I was still none the wiser. I thought it was, the literature told us it was NLHI, it was ET based, or it was Gaia, or it was time travelers. I had no idea. I was just interested in watching the phenomenon. Then I decided to spend an entire summer down there because I became quite passionate. You could say obsessed. And then I started to hear stories from crop circle makers speaking of UAPs, UFOs, time distortions, synchronicities, dream-driven events, massive coincidences that seem to be engineered, and all this sort of stuff. And I thought it was all myth-making because I didn't like human crop circle makers. I thought that they were muddying the waters, and I thought the mystery was deep enough already without these hoax, without these pranksters coming in and just laughing at us. I thought it was just, the mystery was deep enough. And I always thought that the analogy of the magician with the balls under the cups was, and then these guys come along and add another 10 cups. It's already bad enough. It's already mysterious enough. But I held human crop circle makers in the same disdain as some of your listeners will hold me. Okay. Because I thought you're just showing off. You're doing it for a laugh. You're just ego driven, and I really hated them. But I started to listen to their stories, and a lot of them seemed to be very attuned to the vibes of the area. And they said that what they were doing was like an amplification of the work of our forebears with the stone circles, but they were doing it in crop instead. And they seemed to be driven to do it. They seemed to be impelled to do it, like Roy Neary in Close Encounters. They didn't know why, and they didn't think that they were special or anointed or chosen ones. They just thought that because they were aligned and sympathetic to the phenomena, that they were attracting it. So, long story short, one day a crop circle maker said to me, "We've seen you all season. We know that you've been overheard saying that you're not concerned about how the circles got there. You're more concerned about the events surrounding them. Would you like to come out and help?" And I went, "Absolutely. Yes." I said, "When?" He says, "Tonight." He said, we've got a crop circle. We didn't finish it last night. We've got to go back and finish it." So we went out and we did it, and we finished this crop circle. And unfortunately, Sebastian, nothing happened at all. And I thought, okay, these people are just BS. It's just absolute rubbish. It's all myth making. This is absolutely a complete waste of my time. It's a good circle, but these are hoaxes, and I was really disappointed. But then when we finished doing the crop circle, at the exact point that we finished it, I looked at the perimeter line at the far edge of the circle, and I saw a single flash come on. It was like a magnesium flash. It was a little bit like when you used to take Polaroid pictures in the bulb. And it was twilight. It was kind of like sort of 3:10. So you had that, it wasn't night and it wasn't day. And this flash went off, and I said to the team leader, I said, "Oh God, that means somebody's been taking photographs of this. I'm in trouble now because I've got a respectable job. This is illegal to do crop circle making. We've been caught. Oh God!" And he went, "No, no, it's okay." And he was quite blasé. And then this light turned into 6 lights. Then it turned into a dozen lights, and then it turned into 30 lights, and it sprinkled itself around the edge of the circle so that it encircled us, it hemmed us in. And I've written it in my Substack as being the biggest necklace in the world. It was glistening, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And I said, what the hell is that? And our team leader looked skywards, and he said, "Okay, you lot, we finished now. You can go and do your work." Now, what that means is that when we make a crop circle, it's ours for as long as we make it, and then the second we leave the field, it doesn't belong to us anymore. And I said to him, "Who are you talking to?" He said, "Look, what you're seeing now is just like a little round of applause. It's them telling us that this crop circle is finished. Don't do anything more to it because you'll spoil it, and just leave, go. And here's our little round of applause for you." And I said, "Who are you talking to?" And he said, "That lot upstairs." And then he said, "Okay, we're going now. Goodbye." And when he said that, these lights, these 30 odd lights, they just went off. And at that point, I thought, what the hell is going on? Because he was so blasé about it. He was so matter of fact. He said, "If you keep doing this, D, you're going to see this all the time. And this is part and parcel of what we do." So that was my first experience.
So, and I suppose after that, you were pretty much hooked. I mean, it sounds like an extraordinary experience. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was hooked. And the fact that these UAPs, that's what I'd now define them as, because these UAPs were being seen at waist height. I'd never seen anything in the literature where a UAP was that near to the ground. And the second time I went out, the second that we started, we saw a single pink UAP click above us when we did the first stomp, and it was there for the duration. And as soon as we finished, it clicked off again. It felt like a babysitter. It felt like it was minding us. And I thought, when I saw the light, I thought it was military because we have a proliferation of military bases here. But there was no rotor blades and there was no sound. And so strange things don't happen every time, but I was pulled to it to see that. I was pulled to it for the experiences rather than what the crop circle looked like at the end of people going into it afterwards. It was the creation process that interested me.
Actually, could we focus a bit on the creation process? Because, some of my listeners will undoubtedly argue that, oh, well, some of these crop circles are so complex, no way a human being could ever make them. So what would you respond to that?
There's a myriad of answers to that. That explanation, that argument is normally intertwined with people saying these things are formed in seconds overnight. That is absolute rubbish. Okay. That myth has been, really, reinforced by the, Oliver's Castle orbs crop circle, exactly. That is a very dubious video, my friend. There are a lot of unanswered questions about that video. The person that made it is either called John Maybe or John Wavy, depending on where you look on IMDb.
Yes.
He's down on IMDb as a crop circle hoaxer, and he ran or was involved in the CGI studio in Bristol. Okay, so you do the maths. Okay. And also people argue, well, the technology wasn't around for that CGI to be that good when he made it. 2 words, my friend, Jurassic Park. So that's the first thing I'd say. People say, well, they're done in seconds. They're not done in seconds. We've got a window. You'd be surprised how early we start, because when I first started, the guy said to me, "Come out tonight." And I thought he'd mean midnight. You start at 10 p.m. okay, and you've got a 5-hour window. And in answer to your question, we've got this trope because of Doug and Dave. We've got this trope of, oh, it's just two old drunk blokes walking home from the pub. It's not. It's teams of experienced people. And we've got from September until March to do our planning, because the crop circle season is only those few months between March and September. And you just go out, and if you've got 15 people in a team, you'll get a complicated one down in 3.5, 4.5, 5 hours, or you'll get a very simple one down in 1 hour or 1.5 hours. And because of the image of ropes and boards, you just got this clunky image of big planks of wood. We don't use big planks of wood. We'll use maybe a metre board, but we'll have half-metre boards. We'll have square boards for like the fiddly bits, okay? We used markers. They'd normally be poles in the ground. Sometimes I used to use paper plates. As long as you know where you are, and as long as everybody in the team knows what they're doing, you've just got to scale it up from paper, Sebastian. So if you're using a square and compass on paper and it's an inch on paper, it's a few feet in the field. It's just scaled up. So what you're making doesn't make much sense to you as it's going down, but you think, well, I've been allocated this section. As long as this section is done properly, that part of the jigsaw puzzle will be fine when we look at the whole thing. So that's my argument. And the other thing I would say to you is that a lot of the people that have that argument are very much of the mindset of saying, well, we are interdimensional creatures. We are incredible people. The human being is a fantastic species. We're being suppressed by the powers that be so that we don't know how skilled we are. And yet we can't flatten chord into pretty patterns. Human beings are incredible. And if you set your mind to it, you can do it. That's my argument back.
Oh, absolutely. I concur with that. I think, in a lot of these arguments, humans are given, enough credit for what they can actually do. So a lot of this happens during night. Do you guys work with night vision goggles, or is it torches, or how does that work? And how do you remain undiscovered? Because it's farmland, so I suppose
again,
farmers might be
the torches thing makes me laugh so much when I read these on the forums. Of course we don't use torches. In Wiltshire, as you know, because you've been there, even a lit cigarette, you'll see that for
exactly.
It's just ridiculous that we'd use torches. And I've used night vision, but I didn't need it because what happens is once you're in the field, even if it's pitch black, you'd be amazed how quickly your eyes become accustomed to the dark. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but in that 15 to 20 minutes, you're walking into the field anyway. And you're using the tram lines so that our footsteps aren't seen going into the actual crop. But once the construction line is down, Sebastian, once it's flattened, that piece of the corn looks darker than the rest. So you can see where you are. And it's easier than you think. It becomes so that it becomes like a greyish light to you in the end once you've been in the field for about 20 minutes.
Mm. See, that's the thing about this, making crop circles. I think you really need the experience, and then you're actually only qualified to, have an informed opinion about it. Because, this is something I would have never thought of, that, your eyes adapt that quickly, and that you can then actually just go about doing it in the field. So it's very valuable. Yeah.
It is. And when I was compared being a crop circle maker to being in a rock and roll band, because if you're in a rock and roll band, you can rehearse in your shed for 6 weeks and make all the mistakes, and you can do your first gig when you're ready. If you're a crop circle maker, you don't have that luxury. Your first efforts are going to be bad, okay, but they're going to be there for the world to see because there's no rehearsal room. You're using open fields. So when people laugh at crop circles and say, oh, that one's man-made, it's rubbish, that same team is the same team that you'll be then marveling at in 2 years' time when they're great and saying, oh, that can't be man-made, you know?
Yeah. Before we focus on the paranormal
Yep.
stuff that's happening around the creation process, could you take us to Wiltshire and tell our listeners from overseas what that area is like and why it plays such a focal role in all of this?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm collating my accounts and I'm speaking to other crop circle makers that I know personally or that I've had vouched for me. And when I speak to Italian crop circle makers and people overseas, and even people that are making crop circles further up north in England, nobody is reporting the strangeness that I'm seeing in Wiltshire. Okay, I'm only getting these high strangeness reports in Wiltshire. Now, it's a magical area, and the thing that you've got to remember, Sebastian, is that the UAPs and the stuff that we're seeing in the fields during the creation process and after the creation process, you don't actually need crop circles to see that stuff. The locals here have been seeing this stuff for hundreds of years and generations, but they didn't call them UAPs. They called them fairy lights, or they call them nature spirits. It's the cultural tracking thing that Jacques Vallée talks about. So it's a very magical area anyway. We've got a high concentration of ley lines. We've got a high concentration of sites. We've got Chirmalai, we've got Longbarrows, we've got Henges, we've got Avebury, we've got Stonehenge. It's this place is steeped in pagan history, and it's a place which is steeped in interest for archaeologists. And we think that when we make the crop circles, we're just basically rebooting what our forebears did with the stone circles. It's an extremely magical area, and the locals don't bat an eyelid when strange stuff happens down here, because to them, this is just de rigueur. You know, the farmers, they see strange stuff. It's just everyday life for them.
Yeah. Oh, it's very interesting that there might be a connection between, building, these monuments, as it were, in crop as opposed to stone. I think that's a very interesting connection there.
Yeah, that's what we think we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you already mentioned the this bead light shaped phenomenon consisting of 30 orb like things that surrounded the crop circle. And that got you really, really hooked into into making crop circles. What other weird stuff happened over the years, and for how long have you been doing crop circles?
Well, I did them for I made about 25 from memory. A lot of we saw UAPs as a matter of course. Okay, you would see it so often that I became as blasé as my team leader was in that first one, just become conditioned to it. So as well as the UAPs, there's a very profound level to it, because it's stuff that you can't take photographs of, Sebastian. It's dream driven. It's synchronicity driven. We think that because we're aligned to the phenomenon, it kind of attracts us in the same way that if you're deeply into ufology, you're more likely to see UFO. We think that there's some interplay and there's some connection with another consciousness, and we don't know if it's the collective human consciousness which Sheldrake talks about with the species field, or whether there is an interaction within something else which is involved. And I don't want to say channeling, but there's definitely something going on. Okay, now I'll give you an example. The first time that I went out as and ran a team myself, which was about 6 circles in. Before I did that, I was getting recurring dreams. It was always the same dream. I was in a part of Wiltshire that I didn't know, and there were 2 fields, and I was swooping over them like an out-of-body experience. And there were 2 fields, and in each field was a crop circle, which was completely different to the other. And this dream would not go away. And in the dream, next to me was always this school friend that I went to school with that I had no connection with at all. I've not thought of him for 30 years. And I'd wake up thinking, why the hell is this guy in my dream? I've lost touch with him. Anyway, this dream was going on and on and on. And one day I found myself in Wiltshire and I took a wrong turn. Now, wrong turn in this subject doesn't mean what it does in normal everyday life, because accidents happen, mistakes happen, and they all seem to be engineered towards other things. So I took this wrong turn, inverted commas, and I find myself exactly in the arena that I dreamt about. And I thought, this is exactly what I dreamt. This is so strange. And then I looked at the road name that I'd driven down by mistake, inverted commas, and the name of the road was the same road that was the same name that my school friend lived in when I used to go around his house 30 years
Wow.
ago. And I thought, come on. That's not a coincidence. So I knew that I had to do a crop circle, but I couldn't decide which one to do of those two in my dream. So I drew them both out. I spoke to my partner. I spoke to my team. I had a team of 4. 2 guys were from Holland. So I had a team of 4, and I said, look, we can't do both. We haven't got time. So they didn't know which one to do. So in the end, I just Luke Skywalkered it and just, right, I'm going to go in the field. I'll just let it flow through, and wherever the first stop mark is, that's what we'll do. So we got one of the circles down, and it was good. And the next morning I got a call from my partner in London, and she said to me, God, you were busy last night. I said, well, yeah, we got a circle down. And she says, no, you got them both down. I said, no, we didn't. And she goes, yes, you did. She said, it's online. Have a look. And I looked online on the Crop Circle Connector site on an aerial view. And from an aerial view, there was a big hill, which was there was a big hill between these two fields. But aerially, it just looked like a stripe, Sebastian. Okay, but in field number 1 was my first crop circle, and in field number 2 was the other crop circle as it appeared in my dream. And we didn't know about that team, and that team didn't know about us. And that's when you think, this isn't coincidence. There's something going on, you know. So there's a lot of events like that happen that you can't actually photograph, but that's when you think there's some consciousness at play here.
Absolutely. And with these synchronicities, it's often very difficult to pinpoint or specify their meaning, because, you know, it's often they seem somewhat unrelated to the actual phenomenon. No, it didn't really do in your case, in the example you just gave. But I spoke to some UAP experiences, and they also go through, you know, lots of weird synchronicities, which often don't bear any apparent connection to the phenomenon itself. So it's kind of interesting, you know, like seeing double digits that reoccur all the time, you know. Or
what do you mean by that? What do you mean double digits?
So, for instance, if you look at a digital clock and you see 23, or let's say 11:11 or 12:12, you know, this happens a lot. You know, these sorts of things. So that you always say certain symmetrical arrangements, either in geometrics or in numbers. That's what often happens. But they don't bear any obvious connection to the UAP phenomenon as such. So it's interesting.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've got an account in my Substack where that's exactly happened. And the person hasn't made the connection until the crop circle's made. And then they go, hold on, that's directly relevant. But they didn't see the connection at the time. So, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Where do you usually get your ideas from when you make a crop circle? Is a lot of it just intuitive, dream-based, or do you go through a rather rational process of coming up with these rather complex
well, you think
designs?
You think you're going through a rational process, and then you'll find out afterwards that a particular crop circle... Well, this is what happens a lot. You go to make a crop circle and you'll find that another team has made pretty much the exact same thing in not perhaps in that same field, but within a very, very close radius. And we used to knock each other before I was like, how can I put it? When I was still skeptical, when I wasn't sure if something was going on, the crop circle teams would say to each other, "Where did you nick that design from? We were going to do that." And it's the same thing. And then if you look historically, season on season, you'll see the same shapes appear, the same tags, if you like Banksy. There's certain stripes or certain crescents or spikes will appear when everyone's doing them, but no one knows who did it first. So the answer to your question is, we think that it's, oh, okay, we've got a great design there, and then something else happens after creation where you go, well, I've seen that somewhere else. It's like as if the phenomena is saying, well, if I actually put this idea in 4 of your heads, one of you will do it. So it will go down, or 2 or 3 of you will do it. But sometimes what happens is you'll make a mistake on a crop circle in the creation process, and then you have to replicate the mistake to make it look as if it was deliberate. And the beauty is that you, the audience, don't know what it was supposed to be in the first place. So if we have to, modify it, then so be it. And then we'll find out that mistake is the most important part of the circle, because it has a direct significance to the date that we placed it and the place that and the field that we placed it in. So that we do think, how much of this is us and how much of this is us just thinking that it's us,
Yeah, and within the team, is coming up with a design usually a collective process, or is it that the team leader, someone else within the team, comes up with a design and then you just go about doing it?
When I did I worked with one of the best crop circle makers in the business. And the business is a misnomer because none of us are getting paid. But he used to just come up with these designs. I mean, he used to come up. We used to go to his place, and then he'd have a diagram and he'd show us what we were doing. And I would say to him, "T, where did you get this from?" And I think somebody else was giving it to him. So I think somebody else was having the ideas, but didn't have the skill to do it. But generally, no, it's not a collective process. One of us will think of it. Because if it's collective, then it's going to be a hodgepodge of different ideas, isn't it? It's generally one person, or one person will say, "I've got a choice of 2 or 3 here, guys. Which do you like? And we can do the other one next week."
And would you say that there's any, I mean, you already mentioned that, neither you nor your fellow crop circle makers were anointed or had any special,
No,
features that would make you stand out. But is there anything, I mean, I think you probably need to be a certain type of individual with at least pre-existing interests in the, paranormal to engage in crop circle making. So is there anything we could use to characterize this group of crop circle makers? I mean, it's not your average person, is it?
Okay, well, you've touched on something deep there, because my definition of a hoaxed circle is different to the general public's definition. My definition of a hoaxed circle is one that is done from ego, or it's done as art, which is fine. Art is fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. Or it's done to deceive people, or it's done as a commercial enterprise. Somebody's been paid to put it in the field because it's going to be on a television commercial. That to me is a hoaxed circle. What we think is that those of us that are kind of impelled to do this, those of us that are like pulled to do this, all have like a reverence towards the land here. And we just see that what we're doing is like sort of jump starting this work of our forebears. But we do have, all of us seem to have an interest, a pre-existing interest in the paranormal. And a lot of us don't know, because I certainly don't know where my interest came from, Sebastian. It was there from birth. I've always had it. But we've all got this respect towards it, and we've got especially a respect towards the area that we're creating in. Because as I said to you, when I speak to foreign crop circle makers and people elsewhere in England, the reports dissipate. The further you get from here, the fewer stuff, the fewer reports I get, and I can't use any of the reports that they're giving me because they're just funny stuff like the car breaking down. There's nothing high strange. It's only around here that's happening.
What happens if you have a team member who does it only for ego reasons? What are the implications of that?
I told this account last night on a podcast that I did. The closest I can get to it is that we did a crop circle right in Crop Circle HQ. It was one of the prime sites, and we had a couple of girls tagging along with us. I think it was a massive team. I think we had about 12 people in the team, and it was a big crop circle. I think we started about 10:30, and we had to fight to get it done. The light was coming up as we were finishing. But anyway, we had these two girls, and I wasn't happy with them coming out. I thought they were journalists, but something was off about them. Okay. And they just were going, oh, we just want to see the spooky stuff. We want to see the stuff that we've heard about, you know. And so we took them out, and if I was to say to you, would you like to go and make a crop circle with me? You'd probably say, yes, that would be great. You'd be very bored after 10 minutes because it's just at the end of the day, a dozen people minning around, stamping on boards or measuring stuff out, with tape measures. So by 2:00, these girls were really bored. Okay. And one of them said, oh, this is rubbish. Where's the spooky stuff? And the second that she said it, behind her, about 100 foot up, there was this massive corkscrew just materialized in the air. So it wasn't a conventional UAP, it was a corkscrew, and it was turquoise, and it was as big as a juggernaut, and it corkscrewed into it, spiraled down behind the ridge, and it was over in 2 seconds. And this collective whoa went up from the team, and we all stopped work. We'd all seen it. Every one of us had seen it, and we went whoa. And she went what? And she was the only one that hadn't seen it. She had her back to it. It was like strategically done so that she was the only person that didn't have it in her eye line. And our team leader, who was the same guy with the magnesium flare, he said, that's what happens when you treat it as a magic act. Okay, it's not here to do party tricks for you. Okay, so that's one example. But I've got others, but yeah.
It does. Apparently, it does have a certain sense of humor. So this phenomenon.
I'll tell you something that's really interesting, because I had an account that I put in yesterday, which I thought was really funny, where a crop circle maker, before he became a believer, but when he was a believer that they weren't done by people, he was at his home in Gloucester, and he got a compulsion at 1:00 in the morning. You have to go to your beloved Wiltshire. You have to go. And he went, yeah, I'll go tomorrow. No, you will go now. Okay. And he basically just had to sort of acquiesce, and he came down and he planned to sleep in his normal little hidey hole that he had. And he had his sat nav on, and he got to his hidey hole, and the sat nav said, make a U-turn immediately. And he had his Bluetooth on. So he thought that maybe the road was flooded further down, or a tree had fallen down. So he said, okay, so it's make a U-turn. And then he drove for about a mile. It said, you have reached your destination. And he went, well, no, I bloody haven't. So he thought that the sat nav had been malfunctioned. So he rebooted it, programmed it again, set off again. And he went to the other end of the road he was going to go to, thinking that he'd avoid the blockage, and turn around, make a U-turn, and then took him back to this same place. And it happened 6 times. And in the end, he was tired. It was like 3:00 in the morning. He just turned the bloody thing off and said, right, I'm just going to take a chance and go to my normal place. Went to his normal place. Everything was fine. There was nothing wrong. His phone was rattling on his dashboard the next day at 8 a.m. from somebody saying there's a new circle. And I don't need to tell you the rest. It was exactly where this sat nav was taking it to. And I thought that it was really funny that if he'd have actually got out of his car and walked just pigeon steps, he'd have seen the circle makers at work. And we both thought it was really funny that potentially a non-human intelligence was steering him towards a solution where we know that they were man-made. We thought that was really funny. And there was like this little sense of humour, mischief, cosmic joker element to it, you know.
Exactly. No, that's a very nice little story. Yeah. And is there anything malicious about about the phenomenon? Have you encountered anything where you would say, "Oh, this wasn't a particularly nice experience," or has anything personally followed you home? This is also something you sometimes hear with the UAP phenomenon, that you have poltergeist-like activity following you home and molesting you for a certain period of time.
Yeah, I've had exactly that. I didn't know that was common. I had two things happen to me. I won't go into detail, but I made a crop circle out of ego to impress somebody, and it came home. And I had strange stuff happening at home, which I don't want to go into because I don't like to attract it by talking about it. But yeah, and then I had a situation where I went to a crop circle, which I'd been part of, and it was a glorious sunny day in Wiltshire, and it was beautiful. And if it wasn't for my car being parked in the next field, it could have been the 5th century. It was like my car was the only thing which stood out as being 21st century. It was beautiful. But as I walked towards this crop circle, because I had this arrogance that you have on a sunny day where nothing gothic or bad could happen, you
Yes.
know, and I just addressed it, and I just said, okay. In my mind, I said, okay, once you take us out as the foot soldiers and the pawns, who are you? That's what I said to like the master builders. And the second that I said that, I had this overbearing feeling, like when people get abducted and they say that when they speak to the Greys and they say to the Greys, who are you? The Greys say, you're so insignificant to even ask. They're so angry that they're being asked. And I had that same feeling. So it was this horrible, terrible, foreboding feeling. And as I walked towards the circle, the feeling was, what, do you really think you're coming in here? And the further I got to it, it was terrible. And at one point, I felt as if I'd actually been struck on the head. And I put it down to sunstroke or nausea. And then I walked out of the circle, and it dissipated the further I got out. And then I got to the end of the crop circle. I got back in my car, and I thought, don't be an idiot. It's a sunny day. What can happen? This is just in your imagination. And I got back out. I went back in, and it happened. It was like, oh, you're back, are you? And it was worse than before. So that was and I didn't have the courage to walk into it. It was intense, and it did feel malevolent. So yeah,
I think it's very important to highlight that not everything about whatever phenomenon you might be dealing with is positive. I think this is this is often the sentiment you get in, either the oh, they're all lovely space brothers line of reasoning, or kind of in the more new agey type of environment. But I think it's as you said, it's important to have a balanced view.
Yeah, it is. And I know other circle makers that have done something maybe for the wrong reasons, through ego or whatever, or they put something in the field. Sometimes I know of one event where somebody put something in the field, and it was quite a innocent design, but a new recruit said, oh, can I add something to this? And the addition turned it into something like a scorpion's tail. It was just this tiny addition altered the complete aesthetic to the circle. And when it went online, people were saying, well, that's got negative vibrations, and he had really bad luck. And so did the rest of the team. It was as if we got the bad luck as well, or they got the bad luck because they'd let him do it. So yeah.
Perhaps to just by way of coming to a conclusion, one thing I've been thinking about whilst we were talking is, so are humans, in your opinion, absolutely essential to crop circles, Or do you think there are some crop circles that are made by humans, then there are some that are made by NHI or whatever you want to call it itself? What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that the circles that started the phenomenon, the single cookie cutter events, I think a lot of those are the real thing, because sometimes the corn was bent like a few inches up. You can't do that with boards. It looked like it was swirled, looked like it had been drilled gently from above. But as far as the geometric patterns, it took me 10, 15 years to find out the truth. But because I've now seen how they're created, I'm not good enough to do some of the brilliant ones, but I can see how they were done because I've worked with the people involved, and you can see. So I'd like to, the thing with this whole subject is you've got to be prepared to have your mind changed at any point. And the second that I found out that humans were involved, I was very, very disillusioned. I was very angry. I thought, I've wasted 10 years of my life on this. But then I thought, oh, hold on. The second that you put humans in, if you're brave enough to put humans into this, it makes the birthed UFO, argument seem actually boring. Once you actually include the human beings into the equation, the mystery is 100 times bigger than you originally thought. And I'm, after many years of study with ufology, I'm going really down the path of Jacques Vallée and a lot of the more seasoned ufologists that say this is not a nuts and bolts phenomenon. It's not ET. It's not outer space. It's something far, far closer, which probably coexists with us on a different dimension, if you like. And that's where we are.
Yeah, and I think, the same holds true for ufology proper. You have to bring humans into the equation. 95% of the evidence we have is anecdotal, based on personal human experiences. So, and unless we take these into account and develop proper ways of actually studying them, very little progress can be made in this field. So I think what you presented today makes a really valuable contribution to the topic overall, namely this idea that you really have to bring humans back into the equation.
Another reason why it is because those single circles were so basic. They were beautiful, Sebastian, but they were so basic. It's almost as if when you listen to other reports of like seances and spiritualists, when the spirit comes through, or within Ouija boards, when the spirit comes through, it always says the exertion of pushing through that barrier has exhausted it, and it doesn't stay for very long. The messages are very garbled. It's almost as if with the crop circles, those early events were just the phenomenon just expelling enough energy that they can, and then it's just a single circle. But it's almost like it was a recruitment drive. So it was throwing down the gauntlet for the humans to say, well, I can do better than that. And then it then comes in and uses us as the pawns to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really does. So thanks a lot, Dee. You've been very generous with your time. How can people find you, and what are you currently working on? I take it a book is in the making, or?
It is, but I've been working on this for some years, and because when I interviewed the crop circle makers, a lot of the accounts are exactly the same. I can only put in 1 in 10. So in the meantime, I've got a Substack, which is itcan'tbepeople.substack.com. And the reason why I call it Can't Be People was when I walked into my first crop circle, I just went, it can't be people. And that's why I called it that. But obviously, knowing what I know now, it is people, but there is something else. And I update, it's free to subscribe, and I update normally 1 or 2 weeks with either an interview or a new account from a crop circle maker from back in the day.
And I'll make sure to include the link to that
That's
Substack
very
in
kind of
the
you,
description of this episode. So thanks a lot, Dee. And I'll definitely, it would be lovely to have you on again at some point once the book, has been published or is in the final stage. It's very, very interesting.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.